everyone, welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. Here we are back in the studio, and we are so happy about that. We are seeing our guests face to face. We are spending time with a person. We've got some plexiglass in front of us, but we're good to go, and we are just really so grateful for everyone and everybody who lent a hand during this pandemic time to get us up and running on Zoom and to let our shows be produced and put on the air. So we're glad to be back, and thank you so much for being with us and for being here today for our show. My guest today is Evie Lovett. Whether in photography, encaustic painting, public outdoor installations, or teaching, Evie is an artist. Her work has been shown in the whole Brattleboro area and through the Vermont Folklife Center and in public venues from Cape Cod to Cambodia. She brings her creative sensitivity to everything she does, and her careful eye can capture a moment or maybe open us up to a new one. Welcome, Evie.
Thank you for inviting me, Wendy.
I'm so glad to have you on the show.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Evie, you have done, you've been in so many different genres of art over your life and over your career. And I wonder, just to start out, I'm just wondering if you had any influences when you were young.
Well, I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. I guess when I think of influences, it's people that I remarked on who lived life in a creative way, either by making art or gardening or I think I've always been fascinated by people who bring creativity into whatever it is that they do. I mean, my dad was an engineer, but I feel like he lived creatively. Yeah. And when you introduced me as an artist, I felt this sort of clutch, like, oh, does that mean I really am? Because I think for many artists, I don't think I'm alone in this, you sort of, many of us question at what point are we an artist? Are we an artist when we're able to sell work? Are we an artist when we spend the majority of our time creating art? Are we an artist when we don't spend the majority of our time creating art because, say, we're raising kids or something like that? Yes. And yet it's what we want to be doing with our time.
Yes.
So I don't know the answer to that, but it feels really good to hear that word.
Oh, that's nice.
Assigned to me.
That's nice. And I think it has so much to do with expression, whether it's music or engineering or painting, it's your own personal expression. Yes. When did you first pick up a camera? Or was that your first art?
Well, it's, again, going back to this sort of like, who is an artist, what is creativity? I'm such a believer that we should not be shackled by the concept of innate creativity. I just think that's BS. And I will say that I was someone who was shackled by that. So I'm coming out as a kind of recoverer in some way. Yeah. I think I had an eye that was able to assess what I thought was good or bad. I think I was drawn to making, but what I made, I didn't like. I didn't think it was good by whatever, standards had been created in my head. And so I really squashed down, I think. For many years I squelched what was my great desire, which was to be a maker of some kind. I was an art history major in college, never took a studio art class, never took a photo class. And I think I came to photo because there is something about photography that is responsive, and the act of kind of creating, like I'm going to draw a face, is in some ways very terrifying. The act of responding to the world around you was just infinitely more accessible to me, and a place where I found peace, and I could, it slowed me down, it made me more attentive. When did I first pick up a camera? I actually still have the Pentax, it's not a Pentax K1000 for all of you photo geeks out there. It was a Pentax ME Super that my dad gave me when I was 13 or 14. And it was traveling and taking photographs that first gave me the knowledge or first introduced me to the concept that actually it was the taking, and that's again a fascinating verb. You know, people talk about taking photographs, and we can talk about that further on. A lot of we photographers say making photographs because it's less. It acknowledges that there is a power dynamic in the taking of a photograph. So I think I back to what I was saying earlier, I realized that in the making of photographs of situations that I was in, it was a way to connect actually with people.
Right.
I've always been interested in people more than other types of photographs.
Yes, that's portraits or photographs of people in action.
Yeah. Documentary portraiture.
You've had very specific projects with photography too, and there are a few that I will mention. One I think that's so interesting because their world when you were taking photos of your kids, and I'm kind of also assuming that was you getting back into the field of photography.
Or really even starting in the field of photography. I mean, when I graduated from college, I worked as a in a photo news agency called Gamma Liaison in New York, and it was really, what I wanted to be was behind the lens. Where I was behind a desk, essentially selling photographs. Yeah. And I actually realized that I didn't think I had it to be. I didn't think I had the qualities that were needed to be a photojournalist in that era.
You know, the photos of your kids, again, it's sort of when I was thinking about photography in general, and we talk about capturing, you know, someone in a photo. And can you just give a couple words about what that was like to take photos of your kids?
The amazing thing was that it sort of led into the next series that I did, which was backstage at the Rainbow Cattle Co. of drag queens in Dummerston, Vermont. Because I think what I was trying to do was not set up, I was trying to respond. I mean, obviously I'm there with a camera in my hand, so it's not like they don't know I'm there, you know. Right. But I wanted to respond to their world, which was a world, you know, of play and dress up and taking on different persona and temper tantrums and, you know, obstinance and joy and creativity and boredom. And I mean, one of the photographs in that series is they're just watching television, like slack-jawed. Yeah. In the days of watching television.
Exactly, yes. Right.
But it was, I felt confined because I was a stay-at-home mom, and this was what I had. Yes. And there were times that it was actually really fraught. I mean, there is a photograph of my son, Ben, naked, having a temper tantrum. And, you know, you could look at that and say, like, that's a really messed up thing to be doing when your son is having a temper tantrum. And yet, you know, many parents will know that, like, there's not a lot you can do. Right. So I'm okay about being criticized for that. But, you know, it was just trying to see what was, and then what I saw was dress up. Yeah. And that led to an interest in how dressing up enables us to take on a different persona, be that of like a bride, or, you know, like the sort of stereotypical dress up in the white dress. Like, why do we all do that? That is crazy. Or, you know, work attire, or casual attire, or drag. Right.
Because so many of your projects, like the portraits, your children going to Rwanda, the Blackfeet Reservation, a collaboration that you did with Suzanne Kingsbury, and of course Rainbow Cattle Company. You know, those are all things. Some of them are a little bit edgy. Some of them are certainly challenging. Rwanda, I'm sure, was an incredible experience. You are both there and you're behind the lens. And can you talk about that?
I guess if I can sort of take your question and kind of redirect it a little bit.
Please.
I think that the process of being the photographer and being the present and it being your decision from which vantage point to photograph a situation, what situation to photograph, ultimately for me, the power dynamic of that became incredibly uncomfortable. You know, as a white woman of privilege, I was aware that even if, in the case of Rwanda, for example, they would say as we entered a hospital room, please let us know if you would prefer not to be photographed. So we made sure that we were always asking permission. But, you know, what is someone in that situation going to say? You know, they're sick, they're in a hospital, they're thankful to be there. If the hospital, you know, contact is you know, finessing my being there and photographing them, they're without the kind of power that they should have.
Yes, right.
And so I actually pretty much have stopped photographing people because I just couldn't reconcile taking the kind of photographs that I really wanted to take, which, you know, you called edgy, and I think what I would maybe reframe that as saying areas in which I didn't have personal experience, and areas maybe in which in terms of the power dynamic, I had more power as a white American woman or whatever. Or in the case of the Cattle Co. as a, you know, straight American woman. And I just, you know, what I loved was how the making of the photographs, the project was kind of a get in, not a get in free card, but, you know, it was an entrance to a community that I really wanted to learn more about. But my wanting to learn about it and then translating it through my biases into, you know, a photo show just started to feel not right. But I really was sort of at the end of a road. And I kind of looked around and thought, what? And my dear friend Julia Jensen, who's a wonderful painter, was teaching Encaustic classes at the time.
I think a lot of folks don't know what encaustic painting is, but maybe you could give us a little snapshot.
Oh, I'm always thrilled to sort of advertise it because it's totally addictive. Encaustic is a 2,000 plus year process. It was used, you know, in Roman Egypt in, you know, BC. And on grave masks, you know, the paintings that were made from encaustic, which is a combination of wax, resin that raises the temperature that it melts at, and then pigment. So you're painting with hot wax, essentially. So, but the great thing about it is that you can integrate photography, you can integrate imagery, and you can also scrape away that which you don't like. So you make marks and you can gouge in. So all of for me, it was such a perfect medium. It's something I think I've been searching for my life, because my natural sort of self-criticism is much more unfettered when I know I can just scrape it away.
Right.
And, you know, I can incorporate historical documents. I'm sort of the record keeper in my family, actually on both sides, and I have a lot of old photographs that I can photocopy and sort of integrate into art. And that feels like very personal stuff. One project that really felt particularly collaborative, which was backstage at the Rainbow Cattle Co., in which I worked with the Vermont Folklife Center to do interviews with the individuals that I'd photographed, and we integrated their voices into this exhibition, which traveled to every county in Vermont through a shout out Vermont Community Foundation Samara Fund grant. I mean, that felt like a much more collaborative process because of doing this project with the Vermont Folklife Center and with a man named Greg Sharrow, who was the director there for many years, an ethnographer and just a wonderful guy. I discovered the joy of collaboration. And so when I met Elizabeth Billings and Andrea Wasserman at the Brattleboro Museum when we were all showing there in 2015, I guess. I was captivated by the idea that they worked together, they collaborated to make art together, and I asked them a lot of questions, and we really connected. And then they reached out to me a couple of months later because there was a grant, the National Endowment for the Arts Our Town grant that the town of Brattleboro had received to do a public art project. And they asked me if I wanted to collaborate with them. So that was we ended up getting the grant, doing the project, which I hope people in Brattleboro know. It's the temporary installation on the side of the parking garage. There's a photographic installation and some benches on Depot Street, across from where the train station.
Right.
And we did a video that played every hour on the hour for a year.
Wow.
From dusk till 11 p.m.
Yes.
in the alley
Yes.
next to the transportation center.
And this project is called Ask the River. This is all about the Connecticut River and our relationship to it.
So that project led to Ask the River, which is our current project. Yep, we called that From the River to the River.
Right.
And when it came time to take down the temporary installation on the parking garage, actually Emily Kornheiser was in a leadership training program with Elizabeth Billings, and Elizabeth said, "Oh yeah, we're going to take it down," and she actually started to cry, and she said that has been just an uplift to, in a place that needed an uplift.
Yes.
And so we resolved actually to go out and do something we'd never done before, which was fundraise for a public art project on our own. So with the permission of the Town Arts Committee and the Town of Brattleboro and the Select Board, we got the okay to start this initiative to put a piece of kinetic art on not just the little part where the sculpture is now, but the whole east side of the parking garage.
Yes.
And that also led to an incredible collaboration with the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, with the Brattleboro Museum, with the Connecticut River Conservancy, and with an enormous amount of people that that are known to this Brattleboro community, like Erin Miley O'Keefe and Rich Holsha, to do not just this installation, but to really look at how this place is in our Brattleboro and the role that open places play and the intersection of different groups of people in Brattleboro, because the transportation center has been a real lightning rod for kind of concerns for safety, even though there is no greater incidence of issues there.
Yes. Right. Right, and you were doing so many of the things that you've been doing all these years with collaboration and working with people and individuals, and also the whole community piece I think is so interesting. For folks who haven't seen, there are things available. We'll have the information at the end of the show to get in touch with the Ask the River site. But you also did a show at the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, which was an amazing show. And that was using some of the cyanotypes, right.
So for those of you who don't know, this is a cyanotype. And we started making these with student groups in collaboration with the education department at the museum. 25-foot long silk banners. And we had 20 workshops set up this past spring and summer to do. The idea being that we would essentially immerse ourselves in thinking about the river and in making art that reflected whatever came up. So it's been, we were able to do about 7 before the pandemic, and we're in the process of trying to figure out how to safely do art making in community as we go forward.
The artist talk that I was able to hear with Rich Hulshoe and with, I'm sorry, what is...
Kathy Erfer from the Connecticut River Conservancy.
She was fabulous.
Yeah.
They were both fabulous. And you get this whole Abenaki take on the river and its history and all of that. I don't know when this started for you, but you have a whole teaching component that you've done with art in the classroom, in different kinds of classrooms as well.
Through the Vermont Arts Council,
Oh.
I applied initially to be a teaching artist maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And I actually quickly found out that one really wonderful way to engage students immediately with photography and with looking was by making cyanotypes, which is, again, I sort of feel like I'm working, I just realized there's a thread. I'm working with these really like old processes.
Yes.
So Cyanotype 200 plus, no, not 200 plus, sorry, 1850.
Yeah.
One of the first most well-known practitioners was a woman named Anna Atkins. And it basically is using a combination of chemicals on some sort of surface and simply exposing those light-sensitive chemicals to light. So that which is, if you have a piece of fabric and it's covered, that part that doesn't receive light ends up on the whiter end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
That part which does receive light ends up on the bluer end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
My life has been kind of zigzaggy and it's branched out, and I think where it's coming together now is the teaching, the art making, and the community element, the connecting that I was originally drawn to with the making of photographs of people. It's all possible in community art making. And, my kind of personal challenge going forward is to try to be as creative as I can in using the vocabulary of art that I have accessible to me to process for myself and with others that which is happening in our world right now. And by that I mean dealing with the pandemic and also trying to understand how we as a nation have not dealt with our past of racial injustice. I feel like it's a real time of reckoning, and if there's a way that art, to read about it, I mean, there's many ways to process this time, and I would love to be able to do it and to enable others to do it in a more visceral, hands-on way.
And I think that's one thing that Ask the River is really bringing to people. And we have the whole ecology piece and our whole relationship with nature with that project as well, which has come up in some of your other projects. But that's another big thing that we're looking at for all of us. One thing, Evie, given all of this, this array of things that you've done and been curious about and made, is, I know that, and you've talked a bit about this, the difference between, or the integration between working solo and working collaboratively, whether that's a community or another person or group of people.
I need to work collaboratively, and it's so interesting because actually I'm an introvert, in that I draw sustenance and energy from time spent alone. But I think I'm incredibly fed by what we can accomplish, how 1 + 1 is greater than 2. And in the case of Elizabeth and Andy and myself, 1 + 1 + 1 is much greater than 3. And then you add in Stephanie Bonin and Rich Hulshoe and Aaron and Kathy, and it's huge. And it's interesting because there's a group of us gathered together to apply for and we received an AARP grant to do a pop-up in the alleyway between the Transportation Center in Brattleboro and Vermont Center for Photography. And it's a kind of messy process, getting sort of just everybody together. What are we going to do? And yet that for me is it.
Yeah.
Kind of squeezing something that actually can happen.
Yeah.
It tests me, as probably tests us all, patience. It's not my strongest virtue. But for me, it's where the heart is.
Yeah, the heart, and also the dynamics, the different things that you've done dynamically, whether it's going to the Blackfeet Reservation, or the Calico, or, doing your own art, the Encaustic art. I mean, there are a lot of threads, and there are a lot of ways that you're expressing these things. I think that that so many things come together. Were you working on Zoom over these last few months with your group for Ask the River?
So it was interesting because we had to pivot from doing these in-person cyanotype banner making activities. We had them planned with Downtown Brattleboro Alliance, with a number of school groups. We were planning one with the groundwork staff and clients, to something that we could do from our homes. And actually we had something that we wanted to do, and this ended up being a really fruitful time for that, which was tightly design the Transportation Center sculpture.
Oh, great.
So I would say we've settled on a final design for us from our perspective, and we're trying to integrate, we're sourcing material, stainless steel and aluminum discs and strips. I mean, this is a 30-foot by 80-foot piece of real estate, and we've been incredibly supported by the community and by a multitude of foundations. Thank you, Vermont Arts Council, Thomas Thompson Trust.
And the Community Engagement Lab, the Thriving Community Project grant. I mean, a lot of your time also has gone into grants and
a lot of grant
artists.
writing, and a lot of but it's great because each one forces you to articulate, and we have kind of adapted, since this is something that we generated rather than sort of an assignment that was given.
Right. Well, Evie, this has been fabulous. This has been wonderful.
Really nice.
Yes, and I would say to our viewers, all of the information again will be at the end of the show, so that you can access these things and see a lot of these projects that Evie has done. And I think that we just really look forward so much to seeing how this is going to transpire over time, how it's going to affect our community, and the people, more and more people being more and more involved and engaged with it. Yeah, it's very exciting.
Brattleboro is a really incredible community, and I feel incredibly lucky to be operating as an artist in it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Evie. We're so glad that you are an artist operating and making. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks.
Thanks to all of you for being with us on our Back into the Studio show with Evie Lovett. We are a weekly show. We will be back next week. And we've got the Plexi thing going on like everybody else in town and the world does. And we're grateful to be here and so glad that you joined us. Thank you.